Power doesn't knock, it arrives. Venezuela didn't collapse quietly. It collapsed on camera. And the moment it did, money showed up. I'm watching a US president stand in the White House and make an offer, not to voters, not to allies, but to oil executives. Total safety, total security. Those words were not meant for Venezuelans. They were meant for balance sheets. In Trump's world, chaos is not a tragedy. It's an opening. Remove a regime, guarantee protection, invite capital. Suddenly, a failed state becomes a business plan. You are told this is about rebuilding, about stability, about cheaper gas for you. But history tells us something colder. When power and oil move together, someone always pays the price later. If you want to understand how the modern world really works, don't look at speeches. Look at who gets the guarantees. Stay with me. Because this story is not really about Venezuela. Let me slow this down. Because beneath the headlines, there is a structure. This is not simply about removing Nicolas Maduro, and it is not just about oil. This is about how power is exercised in the 21st century. The United States did not arrive in Venezuela with aid packages first. It arrived with force. And immediately after, with contracts, Trump framed the moment as an unprecedented opportunity for American companies, for American prices, for American advantage. The message was clear. Venezuela's oil is open again. And this time, it comes with U.S. protection. But here's the tension. Oil executives were smiling, yet they were cautious. They talked about legal risk, about broken institutions, about a country that is still uninvestable. So we are left with a contradiction. Political certainty promised overnight. Economic reality that takes decades to rebuild. To understand why this gap exists, we have to go backward into Venezuela's past, into the choices that turned abundance into collapse. That story begins long before Trump. To understand Venezuela, you have to understand oil. For decades, oil was not just a resource. It was the state. In the late 1990 seconds and early 2000s, Venezuela was booming. Crude prices were high. Production was strong. Money was flowing. Then came a shift. The government reasserted control. Foreign assets were nationalized. Companies like ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips walked away, not by choice, by force. Investments stopped. Infrastructure aged. Expertise drained out. Oil fields don't collapse overnight. They decay slowly. Pipelines rust. Refineries fail. Production slips. Year after year. By the time Nicolas Maduro was in power, the system was hollow. Vast reserves on paper. Broken machinery on the ground. This is the paradox Trump is stepping into. The world's largest oil reserves and one of its most damaged oil industries. That damage explains everything that comes next. The urgency, the promises, the pressure to move fast, and it sets the stage for the first real crisis. Then reality broke through the optimism. This was the first shock. Trump spoke about boosting production fast. 18 months, a surge, a comeback story. But oil doesn't work on speeches. It works on steel, law, and trust. Executives knew this. They said it carefully. They said it publicly. Venezuela, they admitted, was still uninvestable. Fields were damaged. Contracts were unclear. Courts were unpredictable. Debt was unresolved. And beneath it all sat a quiet bomb. Billions in unpaid claims. ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, nearly 20 years of frozen disputes. Trump waved it away. We're going to start with an even plate. No looking back. No settling the past. That moment mattered because it revealed the risk. Capital can move fast, but memory doesn't. When governments reset history by force, investors listen and they hesitate. This was the first mini crisis, not on the streets, but in boardrooms, and it forced a deeper question. What exactly was being promised here? That question leads us to the system beneath the surface. Here is what sits beneath the speeches. A quiet mechanism, simple, powerful. The US did not promise democracy first. It promised security. This is the deal. Military dominance creates certainty. Certainty attracts capital. Capital extracts value. Trump said it plainly. The government will not pay. The companies will, but the state will protect them. Courts, revenue streams, physical assets, an executive order followed. Venezuelan oil money held in US accounts would be shielded, not seized by creditors, not tangled in lawsuits. This is not charity. It is infrastructure for profit. In this system, sovereignty becomes flexible, law becomes adjustable, and oil becomes the organizing principle. But systems like this have limits. They work only if stability holds, only if politics stays frozen, only if people stay quiet. History suggests that rarely happens because when extraction accelerates faster than legitimacy, pressure builds. And that pressure doesn't stay hidden for long. It erupts. The second crisis didn't start with oil. It started with people, because while executives discussed liftings and contracts, Venezuela remained fractured. Institutions were weak. Trust was gone. Trump spoke of control, indefinite control, of oil flows, of revenue, of the future. But control without consent is unstable. Here is the tension. Oil is global. Politics is local. The faster production is pushed, the faster fault lines appear. Workers demand wages. Communities demand services. Old elites resurface. New ones compete. This is where history intrudes. Foreign intervention has boosted oil output before, and just as often, it has unraveled because oil money moves faster than governance. And when it does, corruption follows. Resentment grows. Violence finds oxygen. This is the second mini crisis. Not a single explosion, but a chain reaction, a system under strain, pulled forward by markets, held back by reality. And in moments like this, the cost is never abstract. It lands on ordinary lives. That's where we have to go next. This is where the story touches you, even if you live far away. Because for ordinary Venezuelans, oil is not an abstract asset. It is food. It is electricity. It is medicine, or the lack of it. You don't rebuild an oil industry in spreadsheets. You rebuild it with workers, with engineers, with families who stayed while everything collapsed. And here is the brutal truth. They are being asked to wait again. Wait for investment. Wait for stability. Wait while revenues sit in protected accounts. Wait while deals are negotiated above their heads. You are told this will bring prosperity. But if you are standing in Caracas, prosperity still feels theoretical. Higher production does not automatically mean better lives. Not if institutions are weak, not if trust is broken, not if decisions are made elsewhere. This is the human gap in the story between oil flowing and life improving. If this matters to you, don't just follow prices. Follow people, because what happens to them decides whether this system holds. And that question doesn't stop at Venezuela's borders. What happens in Venezuela never stays in Venezuela. Oil is global. Every barrel shifts a balance somewhere else. Trump was clear about the goal. More Venezuelan oil means lower prices. Pressure on rivals. Leverage in a surplus market. This is not just economics. It's geopolitics by pipeline. Russia watches carefully. So does OPEC. So does every country whose budget depends on oil staying expensive. Flood the market and power moves. Alliance strain. Revenue models crack. And then there is precedent. If intervention leads to control of resources, others take notes. Not the rhetoric. The result, this is how norms erode. quietly, transaction by transaction, Venezuela becomes a signal that military power can still reshape markets, that sovereignty can be conditional, that resources follow force. The global system absorbs these shocks slowly, but it remembers them. And that memory shapes what comes next, which brings us to the future. Not one future, but several. There are three paths from here. None of them are clean. The first is the optimistic one. Investment arrives, legal reforms follow, production rises steadily, not explosively, institutions rebuild alongside infrastructure. Oil revenues begin to reach people, slowly, imperfectly, but enough to stabilize the country. This is the story Trump once told. The second path is muddled. Money comes in, but selectively. Production increases, but governance lags. Elite deals harden. Public trust stays thin. Venezuela exports more oil, yet remains politically fragile. The system works, but only on the surface. The third path is darker. Extraction accelerates faster than legitimacy. Disputes return, security costs rise, capital hesitates again, the country becomes rich in barrels, poor in stability. History suggests this outcome is not rare. These are not predictions. They are structural possibilities, because oil doesn't decide the future. Institutions do. And that brings us to the final question. Not about Venezuela, but about us. This story ends where it began, with a promise: total safety, total security. Those words sound reassuring, but they should also make you pause, because safety for capital is not the same as safety for a country. Security for investors is not the same as stability for people. What we are watching in Venezuela is a model. Power clears the ground. Markets move in. Institutions are expected to catch up later. Sometimes they do. Often they don't. The real insight here is not about Trump or oil companies or even Venezuela. It's about how the world now works. Interests first, values second. If at all, if you want to understand the future of global politics, follow these moments. Not when wars start, but when contracts are signed. If this helped you see the system more clearly, stay with me. There is more to unpack, more patterns to expose, because the next story will look different. But the logic will feel familiar, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.